It's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the big show. I'm Michael Traikos. With me, as always, is Ryan Kennedy, and pleased to have again, I guess you're a regular co-host here, Drew Shore. How you doing, Drew?
I'm doing great. Excited to be back, and we got a lot to talk about this week.
So third time, I think you're officially a big show member now.
You know, all right, I like
it. Whether you like it or not.
I like it.
All right, let's start in Toronto, and you're going to have to get used to that, Drew, because we always start in Toronto here. Following just an ugly Game 7 defeat to the Florida Panthers, who are already up 1-0 in the conference final. The bloodletting in Toronto has begun. Well, we'll see, I guess. Brendan Shanahan being given permission to chat with the New York Islanders with their vacant GM position. What do we think about, first off, Brendan Shanahan? Didn't take him long to find another job if he is indeed gone. Ryan, what do you think?
Well, I think that if you're the Islanders, Brendan Shanahan is a very enticing name for your front office because he obviously has a ton of experience. He's been in the biggest market in the NHL, and he obviously, as a player, he has Stanley Cup experience, and he's a Hall of Famer on the ice. So I think for a franchise which is going to have basically a radical new look with Lou Lamoriello gone, I can totally see why the Islanders would be interested in Shanahan. You have a team where you have the number 1 pick overall, and you have this chance for sort of a big reset where we always knew them as like a Lamoriello team, even though Patrick Waugh is a very distinct coach himself, but it was always like hardworking, like the different guys in the orchestra, as Lamoriello always used to say. Everybody playing their role, but they never had the high end skill to really be a true threat. So, Shanahan, we know he had high-end skill in Toronto. It'll be very interesting to see if New York could entice him over.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. And I think a lot of people think of the Shanaplan as a complete total failure because you only win 2 playoff rounds during that span. But he got Nylander, he got Marner, he got Matthews, and he almost gave every coach that the Toronto Maple Leafs have had, from Babcock to Keefe to Craig Berube, all the pieces to win. I would argue that it was just, the team didn't, get the job done. But what do you think, Drew? Could the Shanaplan work in New York?
Yeah, I think maybe. I think if you look at their team over the last 10 years, they've been a team that's kind of just been stuck in the middle. They haven't been a team that's ever really rebuilt. They've never been good enough to really win. I don't think they've ever gone into playoffs where teams thought they could win. And I think if you look at the NHL now in the salary cap era, that's kind of a dangerous spot to be in. I think you either kind of want to be a contender or a team that's kind of up and coming and building. And they've kind of been stuck in no man's land for a long time now. So I think a fresh face is definitely due there. I don't know if I love the move, just from a sense that, obviously Brendan Shanahan was an amazing player, but I don't know if that's exactly the number 1 fit that I would go for, but I definitely see why it would be an intriguing option.
Drew, do you think that when you look at it from an outsider's perspective, what went down in Toronto, how much blame does Brendan Shanahan deserve?
I think a lot of people deserve blame there. And I think that, I was looking, if you kind of walk back what happened there, the worst thing that happened to them was the start that William Nylander got off on. You know what I mean? Because I think Marner's no move clause kicked in July 1st. Willie didn't have a deal. And then he comes out the gates just absolutely firing. I don't know how many goals he had in the first 20 or 25 games, but letting star players walk into their contract year without extensions is just a dangerous game to play. And obviously, I think the Leafs are going to pay the price for that now, losing 2 of their top 5 or 6 players for arguably nothing.
Yeah, Ryan, do you think, obviously there's been some GMs there. Obviously, Lou Lamoriello was first under Shanahan. Then we saw, boy wonder, Kyle Dubas take the reins. And then now we've got Brad Treliving. How much is it on the GMs? How much is on Brendan Shanahan? How much is it on the coach? How much is it on the players? Is it a combination of all 4?
Yeah, I think it's certainly fair to say that it's a combination. I think that Ultimately, Lou Lamoriello was a very successful GM in Toronto for what they needed at the time, which was a tear it down rebuild. And, as we mentioned before, like that set the foundation of this team in terms of those very high draft picks that turned into stars and sometimes superstars. I think with Kyle Dubas, maybe that was a misstep where you could tell that he fell in love with certain players and personnel that might have held the Leafs back, whether it was Sheldon Keefe or Justin Hall, guys where I kind of felt like when Treliving came in, the fact that Hall was allowed to go to Detroit, that was sort of his way of taking Keefe's toys away. And then ultimately, Keefe left himself and went to New Jersey. So, I think that's always going to be the interesting fork in the road with the Leafs is, could it have been Mark Hunter as GM instead of Kyle Dubas ultimately, right? But this is how it went down, and the franchise has to reckon with what actually did happen.
Yeah, that franchise now has to reckon with a summer that is arguably the biggest summer of franchise history right now. And Drew, put yourself in the GM shoes, okay? You've got Marner, you've got Tavares, both as pending free agents. You've got Matthew Nyes, who's a restricted free agent, and you got two guys in William Nylander and Austin Matthews who probably would have no trouble trading. How would you handle the summer? Is there a chance that you let Marner walk? Is there a chance that you might entertain a trade for a William Nylander and try to sign Marner? I imagine you could go down this route like 6 different ways, but put yourself in Brad Treliving's shoes, and what would you actually do this summer?
Well, he's in a really tough spot now. And I mean, they put themselves in a very tough spot. And I think if you walk it back, like over the last 4 or 5 years, I think the most disappointing thing for me with them is they've had really good pieces every year, but they've never done anything at the trade deadline at all to like really get over the hump. And I think if you look at every team now who's playing well and does well, like they bring in pieces. Like, I mean, you look at the moves that Bill Zito's made in Florida. I mean, bringing in Brad Marchand and, who else am I just thinking? Seth Jones. And I mean, even in Dallas, like Granlund and Ceci have been amazing. And like they haven't, over the last 5 years, they've kind of just gone through the deadline, haven't really done anything, haven't upgraded. And it's been the same story over and over. So he's in a really tough spot now. I mean, I think for him, I think there's a chance you get John Tavares to take a pretty big hometown discount to stay in Toronto. And I mean, I think he had 38 goals or something this year. So he's older, but he's still playing at a high level. So I think the first small win you could get if you're him is to get Tavares back on a very team-friendly deal, which being a Toronto guy and having a family and stuff, I definitely think there's a possibility of that. But just kind of the mistakes that have compounded over the last 4 or 5 years, like have really put him in a tough spot.
Yeah, like for me, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. If I know that you can get a Sam Bennett, I consider letting Marner walk, and I'm bringing back Tavares, and now you've got a 1-2-3 punch down the middle potentially with Matthews, Bennett, and Tavares, or you could put Bennett on the wing, I guess. If that's not an option, I don't know if I can let Marner walk for nothing. Like I would actually entertain possibly, and maybe I'm crazy, trading Matthew Nyes to try to get something back. He is young. I know it's crazy, Ryan. I know I saw that.
That is crazy.
The other one is, and this is even crazier, maybe you entertain trading William Nylander, who's coming off his best season ever, just because, again, I cannot let Mitch Marner walk for nothing, knowing that, you could possibly be out of the playoffs next year because you just got, much worse.
Yeah, the problem with that, though, is they might not have a choice. Right? You know what I mean? Like, sure, a team might trade something for him now to have the opportunity to talk to him and try and get him done, but they've really just put themselves so far behind the 8 ball here that, the Matthew Nyes one is interesting just because it's like he's so young, he's big, he's strong, and can score. And as we talked about on our last show, guys like me, he's almost like kind of a younger version of like a Mikko Rantanen or one of these big, heavy Svechnikov. And so trading those guys at his age, I think is a risky move, but like I said, I mean, they got some work to do.
Here's the thing, going back on Marner is like, that final game against Florida, he was getting booed every time he touched the puck, at the end of the game. like, can you come back from that? Like, what happens if they re-sign him and he gets booed opening night? I mean, Marner has to be aware of that being a possibility, and it's not fair because, he is a tremendous player, but like, no, you can't trade Nyes. You can't trade Nylander. If you let Marner walk, it's not for nothing because you are getting basically, let's say $12 million in cap space, because I think that's the minimum Marner's going to get on the open market. So would you rather not sign Tavares back at a hometown discount, which I agree with Drew, I think is very much on the table, and then go out and get maybe Bennett and Brock Boeser or Bennett and Nikolaj Ehlers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Drew.
Well, I just want to go in. I've heard this argument a lot on like letting him walk frees up all this cap space. But like a lot of these elite players are not going to be going through free agency. And so it's like, yes, there's a dream scenario, but like, who knows if Sam Bennett's going to probably have offers from 15 to 20 teams, especially with how well he's playing now. So it's like, yeah, they free up a bunch of cap space, but he is a tremendous player. And the other thing is like, there's no guarantee that you're going to bring back a player who's even as good, if not better than him, even if you have that cap space.
Yeah, let's talk about the free agents, because you mentioned, Bennett and Ekblad could very well end up in Florida. Some of the other names out there, Ryan Donato, coming off a 31-goal season in Chicago. We'll see if that can translate if he's on an actual winning team. Then you got a lot of older guys like Claude Giroux, Matt Duchene, Patrick Kane. You mentioned Brock Nelson, Brad Marchand, Jamie Benn. A lot of these guys are not going to replace Marner, but the one name Ryan, you did mention, Nikolaj Ehlers. How important is it for the Jets to get this guy re-signed? Because last time I checked, Winnipeg is not a hot spot for free agents.
Yeah, very much so. And, the ability to retain those guys that you drafted and developed has been crucial to Winnipeg's success over the years. When you think about Mark Scheifele, you think about Josh Morrissey, you think about even like Cole Perfetti now coming up the ranks and having a great playoff run for them, Connor Hellebuyck in net. So I think that, Winnipeg will do what they need to do to re-sign Nikolaj Ehlers, because you're right. Like, they're probably not going to be in the running for some of those other names from other markets. Even though, it's unfortunate because the Jets, they won the President's Trophy this year. They are clearly an elite team in the NHL, but it is rather difficult for them to attract free agents.
Another name, Drew, Brock Boeser, coming off a 25-goal, 50-point season. We know what happened in Vancouver. I don't know if Brock has the appetite to kind of go through another drama-filled season, if it is that, again, with the Canucks. But is he another guy that you would be targeting if you're a team looking for some goal scoring?
Yeah, certainly. Scoring goals is the toughest thing to do in the NHL, and he's had I think he's had a little bit of a rough. I think he's been injured a little bit the last couple of years, but he's clearly a guy who can score goals. And he's kind of like he's not a guy I would say who necessarily drives play, but if you put him with an elite playmaking center, he's a guy who's going to put the puck back in the net and in the back of the net. And I think he's definitely going to be a guy that I would target if I was one of those teams who had a chance to contend.
Ryan, where do you think Boeser ends up?
I would like to see him in Seattle. Simply because the Kraken doesn't have a lot of high-end talent. They have a lot of guys that are like pretty good. But I think they need somebody that has that sort of 30, 40 goal potential to, really help out some of those young guys like a Matty Beniers and a Shane Wright, the guys that are going to be driving this franchise in the next several years. I'd like to see him there. And hey, maybe he doesn't even have to I guess he'd have to move, but it wouldn't be a far move.
Yeah. You need someone better than a Jordan Eberle or a Jared McCann for a goal scorer there. I agree with you. Well, one last thing before we jump into what's been already an entertaining conference final. Next summer's free agency. Boy, oh boy, you're talking about star players. Like, I know probably 90% of these names are not going to make it to market, but let's go through the names here real quick. Connor McDavid, Kyle Connor, Kirill Kaprizov, Jack Eichel, Artemi Panarin, Marty Nashis, Adrian Kempe, Mason Marchment are just some of the names that are going to be potentially available by 2026. Of the guys I just mentioned, do we see a chance that, obviously, I don't think a McDavid's going to be available. I know Toronto fans are kind of like, hey, maybe we should hold some money off to the side. But if you're a team looking at free agency this summer, do you potentially say, let's keep like maybe 6 or 7 or 10 million around with the cap going up? Maybe you can take a run at one of these guys.
Yeah, I think certainly. I mean, going through the list of both years UFA class, like Sam Bennett is just laughing right now because, I mean, he's obviously having the season he is. And I mean, you guys know how the cap's going up and is going to continue to go up. But man, there's just not a lot of good players available this year at all, especially guys who are super high end like Sam Bennett. And I mean, a lot of those guys the following year, like you said, I don't think are going to end up hitting the market. But I mean, that class is crazy deep.
Yeah. I would say the name that I would keep an eye on is Artemi Panarin with the Rangers, because you have a high-end player and it's a franchise where it kind of feels like they're going backwards. And if you look at, they had some tremendous draft lottery luck a couple of years ago where they picked first and then second overall. They already traded Capo Caco. Alexis Lafreniere has just not gotten into gear. I saw a list of number 1 overall picks the other day, and Juraj Slafkovsky, I think it already has more points than Lafreniere, or at least he did this season. I think it was this season he had more points than Lafreniere. So if you're Panarin, and you've already seen Zibanejad have a tough year, and you've already seen guys traded away, do you say to yourself, like, do I want to play for another cup, or am I just happy living in Manhattan making a lot of money? Like, I think that one's an interesting scenario to me.
Yeah, and he's not that young. I know he came into the league the same year as McDavid, but obviously he had been playing in Russia for a number of years. Was one of those old Calder Trophy winners. Let's talk about McDavid. Wow, what a game last night. Game 1 between the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars was going all in Edmonton's favor through first 2 periods. I think they were up 3-1 heading into the third, and then penalty trouble got the better of them. And we just keep seeing this time and time again of the Dallas Stars. They can score and score in bunches. I think they had 3 goals in 5 minutes and change. Ended up being 6-3. The game could have went either way, in my opinion. But, if you're Edmonton, how are you looking at this game 1 implosion? And is this the kind of game that could possibly haunt them in what looks like it's going to be a real tight series?
I think it could. I think Dallas's power play, specifically last season deep in the playoffs, really started to struggle. It hadn't been off to a great start. And I think Pete DeBoer talked about it a bunch, just was saying that we've had a lot of like high-end players who haven't really been able to hit the score sheet yet and who have been playing pretty well too. So, I mean, you see a guy like Matt Duchene who had been playing really well. Like even the Colorado series, I thought that was one of the best series he played, but he hadn't found the score sheet. And now Dallas is starting to get all those guys rolling. I think their power play went 3 for 4. And I mean, Edmonton, a lot of those penalties were I think 2 of them were high sticking penalties. And I mean, you got to stay out of the box at this time in playoffs. And I mean, you got to give Dallas credit too, because their big players stepped up. And I mean, Tyler Seguin is a guy who obviously had a really tough year and he's starting to find his form. And I mean, Dallas is, I think that could be a game that if Dallas wins the series, Edmonton's going to really look back on and think they should have taken it.
That high stick, Drew, on Matt Duchene, I think it was, where I don't think the stick even touched his face. Tell us as a player, like how much does that go into it, where you see the stick coming and you're just like, you already kind of feign that you're going to get hit?
I saw that from a couple different angles. At first, I thought he hit him. Then I saw like a slow-mo on Instagram or some reel somewhere where it clearly looked like, I mean, he sold it. And I mean, it's the time of the year where guys are going to do whatever they have to do to win. So, I mean, I think that happens a lot. Like you see a guy who kind of feels someone's stick in their skates, and if it's the right time, like, you know what I mean? So I think that whether that was a penalty or not, I also think if you're the Edmonton side, like your penalty kill can't give up 3 goals. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you look at it from their side, it's like special teams at this time of the year. And I mean, I think to Dallas's credit, putting Miro Heiskanen, I know they kind of eased him back in games 1 and 2, or his first games 1 and 2. I think he played like 14 or 15 minutes. But I mean, now the guy's a one-man breakout again. I think he played 23 to 24 minutes last night. I mean, that addition to the Dallas back end is just so huge.
Mm-hmm. I think this was a really interesting game one for both teams, and it'll be fascinating to see who learns the most from it. Because if you looked at the first two periods, obviously it went great for Edmonton. And my observation was that, it feels like a key lesson in these playoffs, and this goes for Toronto against Florida as well, is like you have to trust your teammates, because if you don't, that's when breakdowns happen. And I think Dallas had that problem last night early on, where Edmonton has so much talent up front and they're so good at pushing the pace that you would see guys make moves where it's like, no, you stay in your lane. Like, trust that your teammate there will have his guy and make the right play. And that resulted in some Edmonton goals. I think the Nugent Hopkins one in particular. But then obviously, Dallas found their level and they got to Stuart Skinner. There were a couple of goals there where it's like, he probably should have had that one. But as Drew said, Dallas found their depth. And I think that's got to be scary for the Oilers, where it's like, okay, well, Tyler Seguin had 3 points in game one. So now we got to look out for him, and Matt Duchene's rolling. So it's not just the Finnish Mafia led by Rantanen and Granlund, and then obviously Heiskanen now on the back end. I think the Oilers have to look at what they did well in the first two periods and then say, okay, like, we got to stick to that and obviously stay out of the box.
Yeah, Jason Robertson still hasn't scored a goal since coming back against Winnipeg. He had an assist last night, so maybe that's going to help him going. But you don't notice that Jason Robertson hasn't scored because, like you just said, Ryan, like, you got Seguin, you got Sam Steele making impacts. You've got the Finnish Mafia. And last night it wasn't the Rantanen night, but Dallas still ends up getting 6 goals. Drew, are you at all worried about Stuart Skinner? Like, no safety net now. Cal Pickard doesn't look like he's going to be available in the foreseeable future. It looks like it's going to be Skinner's net. Is that okay if you're an Edmonton fan?
I don't think it's very encouraging, especially, Jake Ottinger too has just, he maybe would have liked to have 1 or 2 of those back, but when he's playing well, especially, you saw it during the Colorado series, he's as good as any goalie in the NHL. And I do think if you're Edmonton, though, you have the 2 of the top 5 best players in the world who, as they showed in the first 2 periods, are capable of dominating any game at any time. But, you even look at it last year in the finals. Edmonton needs, I wouldn't even say they need amazing goaltending to win, but they need average to above average. And if they're not getting that, it's a huge problem.
Yeah. I will also say something else that should be scary for Edmonton is losing that game when Thomas Harley played probably one of his worst NHL playoff games ever.
Yeah, just as we were saying, could he be a better defenseman than Miro Heiskanen right now? It's like,
right.
No, Heiskanen's like, hold my beer. I got this.
Yeah. I thought it was funny, like, after McDavid had that near breakaway where Heiskanen bailed Harley out, they showed Harley back on the bench, and he was kind of laughing like, oh my God, like, I was not prepared for McDavid to be that fast, even though we all know that McDavid is that fast.
Yeah, we've seen it for so many years now, but it's like you still see some of the best defensive skating defensemen in the NHL get caught so flat-footed. These guys are some of the best skating defensemen in the league, and when he's coming downhill like that. And Ryan, your point was interesting because it's like you're saying you got to trust your teammates and to allow them to do their job, but defensively, those top guys just put you in so many weird situations because it's like they're creating so many, like, there's not many people in the NHL who can break other players down one-on-one and kind of create that 5-on-5. And they have guys who can do that, and it just puts defensive players in a really tough spot.
All right. Talking about being in a tough spot, if I'm the Carolina Hurricanes, I do not know how I'm going into game 2 of this series after how game 1 went. And for those who don't remember, Florida, I thought maybe after that game 7 win against Toronto, they would be, maybe a little, licking their wounds a bit, but nope. They just followed it up with just a shift kicking, I'll say, a 5-2 win against the Carolina Hurricanes. I don't know. Like, is there something that Carolina can do that, Toronto wasn't able to do against Florida and that Tampa wasn't able to do against Florida? Because right now the Panthers just look like a juggernaut that is destined to win another cup. No takers. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know if I thought
Welcome
Ryan
to
was
the
going to
club.
jump. I thought Ryan was going to jump in there. I mean, it's crazy because Sam Bennett talked about it in an interview. It's like I was wondering the same thing, right? It's like the short rest and layoff. It's like I feel like it never like translates into a B game for the team in the following series. It's either a D game because they're super tired and banged up, or it's like they just continue to roll like it's another game 7. And you got, to their credit, that's what they did. I mean, Carolina clearly made an effort to get in front of Bob as much as they could. And we're clearly, I think, ran him a couple times and really tried to get in his head. And I mean, I think that if Bob is playing at that level, they're in big trouble.
Yeah. I think Carolina can actually take some lessons from Toronto from the early part of that series, which was use your speed, try to get behind the Panthers, try to stretch them out. I know it's super difficult to do. And, ultimately, obviously, Florida put a clamp on that. But you don't really have a choice because, if I was thinking about this, like, what does Carolina do better than Florida? Well, structurally, not a lot. Do they have the better goaltender? No. Do they have, the better offense? No. The only thing I could say is, and even this is debatable, is does Florida have a defenseman as good as Jacob Slavin? And that's a debatable point because Florida obviously has tremendous defensemen. If you think about Gustav Forsling and what he can do defensively. But I mean, I'm a huge Jacob Slavin fan, and I believe he's the best shutdown D-man in the league. That's like the only place. And the fact that Florida has Forsling, Ekblad, Seth Jones, like it kind of mitigates that. So other than Carolina, just like trying to put pucks past the Panthers and get those like sort of William Nylander style breakaways, like I just don't know what their route for victory will be at this point.
Florida also has Barkov and Reinhart, who may as well be, your 7th and 8th defenseman there. Ryan.
Yeah.
I think that is also the thing. Like, you don't have a Slavin, but you've got 2 guys who are finalists for the Selke this year. One guy that probably needs to step up and be a game breaker is Logan Stankoven. 1 goal in the last 2 games, only 2 assists. On the other side, Matthew Tkachuk, I was looking this up. He had no shots on net in the last 2 games, and I think the last time he scored was Game 3 against the Lightning. It's been a while. You just don't notice it because Florida is getting contributions from their 3rd and 4th lines right now.
Yeah, Tkachuk is hurt. I
mean,
it's
that's what I was going to say. And he's not like the fleetest of foot, even when he's at 100%. So he's clearly, but I mean, he still finds ways. I mean, he's such a gamer. Like, he still finds ways to impact the game. I mean, you see him control a lot of the puck offensively, 5-on-5 behind the net. He's still making a lot of great passes. And I mean, you got to give him credit because he's clearly going through something that is affecting his speed and just his overall health. And he's still finding ways to be effective.
Yeah. Of the 4 finalists or the conference finalists, and these are 3 of the same 4 teams that we saw last year, who's under the most pressure to win the cup this year? And I imagine Florida's not under as much pressure. So maybe it's just the Dallas, Carolina, or Edmonton.
I think it's Edmonton. I mean, a lot of it comes with playing in the Canadian market. You have arguably 2 of the top 3 or 5, whatever you want to call them, best players in the world. And they've been a team that was right there. So I definitely think they have the most pressure for sure.
Yeah, I would agree, especially because I feel like the Oilers got very lucky in round 1, where the Kings basically imploded around them. And, they kind of got lucky the year prior where, Vancouver had their 3rd string goaltender in net, and yet it still went 7 games. So, it's so hard to make it back to the Stanley Cup final. It requires a tremendous amount of skill, but also some luck. And if I'm the Oilers, I have to say to myself, like, okay, like, we can't assume we're going to have luck forever in the playoffs. Having said that, Dallas and Carolina are 2 teams that have been around the periphery of a championship for years now and have yet to actually grab one.
I was going to say, if I'm Eric Tulsky, the GM in Carolina, I'm feeling a ton of pressure because I traded Marty Necas for Mikko Rantanen. Then I had to trade him for Logan Stankoven. And as Ryan just mentioned, it's a team that hasn't been able to get over that conference final hump and get even into the dance. So, to play devil's advocate, I would say Carolina's under a ton of pressure, especially for a guy who, is probably looking back at that trade going, oh, I blew another one here.
Yeah. So. If you look at that trade too, they'd been missing that big power forward for so long that was going to be able to get them over the hump. So Marty Necas is a very high-end skilled player, but he's definitely not the player that Mikko Rantanen is. So when they first made that move, I was like, Carolina's finally making the move to get them over the hump. And now, for a lot of reasons that we don't need to go into, it just didn't work out at all there. So then he's in a tough spot again. But yeah, he's got to be. I mean, he makes a great trade at the start, and then it obviously is backfired.
Well, let's talk about the other hockey tournament that's going on right now. And normally at this time of year, there's a sort of passing interest in the World Championships, if I want to say it that way. Not a whole lot of players are going there, and fan interest is pretty minimal. This year's a little different. You already got Crosby, you got McKinnon there, you've got David Pastrnak, and joining Team Canada today was Porter Martone, or not today, but joining Team Canada is Martone, who is a potential first overall pick. We'll see if he goes in the top 3. As well, William Nylander joining Team Sweden. Ryan, Porter Martone, how important is this going to be heading into the draft? Could this be one of those things where, maybe you have him 3, but he impresses and maybe he shoots up the rankings? How do you see it?
I think there's a bit of a ceiling on where Martone goes at this point because, Matthew Schaefer is clearly the best player available. And it doesn't feel like that's going to change. I love Martone. I think he's probably going to be one of the best pros to come out of this draft. And I think the fact that Team Canada trusts him enough where, you lose Bo Horvat and, you have plenty of options, but they were like, you know what, Martone, let's give this kid a shot. He's big. He's very skilled. He's also very nasty, which probably doesn't play in too much at the World Championship. But I feel like, he's a winger. He's probably going to go in the 3 to 5 range still. You have Michael Misa as a center who had 134 points this year for Saginaw in the OHL. So I kind of feel this is one of those things where I believe Martone is a long-lost Tkachuk brother. But for whatever reason, like when you're at the draft and you're one of those teams that has a very high pick, you're probably going for a center, or in this case with Schaefer, a potential franchise defenseman. So I think it kind of just reaffirms to me that Martone is going to be one of the best players to come out of this draft. But just for those weird kind of draft factors, I think he's probably locked into the 3 to 5 range.
Hey, Drew, U.S. team. They've got Clayton Keller, they got Logan Cooley, they got Tage Thompson, and yet Frank Nazar leading Team USA and tied 5th in scoring as we're talking with 6 goals, 11 points in 7 games. This guy's 21 years old, a first-round pick from 2022. What do you know about Nazar, and is he kind of putting himself on the map here? And I guess should Blackhawk fans be excited about, the potential of this guy maybe becoming a star player alongside Bedard?
Yeah, I think they should be super excited. And I saw a stat recently on his last 10 or 15 NHL games. I think he had a great finish to the season, and now he's able to kind of roll that over to the World Championships. And they're an organization that needs some of their young guys to grow into the players that they can become, just to surround Connor Bedard with some better players. So I think it's a great opportunity for him. And I think it was a good move by some of these young guys who finished strong to go over there. Because a lot of guys, right, I don't think he's going to be a guy who plays on the Olympic team, right? So it's a lot of guys go over there because they want to play on the Olympic team, and kind of there's that angle to it. But then there's also, just from a career development standpoint, I think he had a great finish to the season. This was his first kind of extended stint, and to be able to keep that rolling on the international stage, I think will do well for him heading into the summer and then starting his next season.
Yeah, it's been a kind of a real development season for him, because he started off in AHL alongside or playing under Anders Sorensen, who, when he got the head coaching job with the Blackhawks, he took Nazar with him. And he's been rolling. So that comfort level obviously helping. Speaking of youth, Macklin Celebrini decided to go to the Worlds. I keep seeing videos of him with Crosby. Ryan, like, how important is this for Celebrini's growth? And do you see a chance where Celebrini might sneak his way onto that Olympic team?
I certainly do, because if you think about it, you think about Canada and the amazing options they're going to have up top, just like they had at the Four Nations. Like, you're going to be led by Crosby and McKinnon. You're going to be led by McDavid and McKinnon, but you certainly still want Crosby on that roster. Now you look at it and you're like, well, if you have Crosby and Celebrini together on a so-called third line, and you have, pick whatever awesome winger you want on the other side. That's pretty tight. That's pretty cool. And for Celebrini, just in general, he's on a young Sharks team. Unfortunately, Logan Couture, didn't get to play with Celebrini, and now his career's done. So you didn't have a veteran two-way center that could really, help out Celebrini on that roster. Now he gets this amazing tutorial with one of the best players of all time, one of the best centers of all time. Celebrini's already shown that he can be a two-way guy, that he has a great battle level, and is pretty good on faceoffs. Now he gets a master class from Sidney Crosby. It's just a perfect place for Celebrini to be after a fantastic rookie season.
Indeed. All right, listen up, hockey fans. The Big Show is presented by Sticks.com. Why break the bank on hockey sticks when you can get a pro-level composite stick without the pro price tag at Sticks.com? That's STIX.com. Head over and gear up. And with that, we go on to Ryan's favorite segment of the show. It's Rapid Fire. All right. Drew, will Jake Ottinger be the starting goalie for the U.S. team at the 2026 Olympics?
Yes, he will be. I'm a huge fan of his. I just think in a big game moment, he's the guy I want in the net. Connor Hellebuyck's a great goalie, but I just think Ottinger is going to finish the rest of the playoffs strong and have a great start to next season, and he will be the starter.
What do you think, Ryan? You got Hellebuyck, you got Swayman as well, but has Ottinger moved ahead of both?
I agree. I think it's got to be Ottinger at this point. Even though Hellebuyck, he wasn't the problem at the Four Nations, but he just happened to be the second best goaltender in that game. And I feel Ottinger can be the best goaltender in a game, and often is.
What an embarrassment of riches. I'm sorry, but as a Team Canada fan here, Drew, give me any of these guys. Okay, give me your fourth best goalie at this point. I'll take him. Okay.
I will.
Joseph Woll.
I will say this, though. It's like Jordan Binnington is clearly not at that level on an everyday basis, but for one reason or another, he's shown the ability in a one-game situation throughout his whole career to play at that level, if not higher than any of those. So you guys shouldn't be complaining too much of it.
Fair
He's
enough.
Mariano Rivera. He's the closer.
All right. Ryan, we've only seen one true fight in the playoffs this year. I think it was the Trent Frederick. I can't remember who he fought, but yeah, Nick Hague. You're right.
Yeah.
Are we missing that aspect from the playoffs this year? Because I know you. You're like me. You love the fights.
Yeah, I think we are. And I think there are teams such as the Toronto Maple Leafs that should probably regret that they didn't have more literal fights, because I think they could have used that emotional boost at some point.
Drew?
Yeah, from like an entertainment standpoint, for one reason or another, like the three fights that started the Four Nations, the Canada-US game, like that drew, I had so many non-hockey friends texting me about, like, I think that drove viewership as much as anything else, and regardless of what people say. But yeah, I think that I just remember as a kid growing up, like I saw like Getzlaf fought Thornton like to start a playoff series right off the opening draw. So I think it's pretty cool in playoffs when like two non-fighters who are some of the best players on the team just have that much kind of desire to win. And it can definitely be an emotional boost for certain rosters.
I'm with you both. Remember last year, David Pastrnak dropping him with Matthew Tkachuk? Like, who would have thought? That was Pasternak's, I think, first ever fight, and never mind the NHL, like just ever.
Yeah, and the story on that was like he looked up at Jim Montgomery and like told him he was going to do it. And I think Montgomery said like he almost like didn't know if he was being serious or not. But I don't even think that was Matthew Tkachuk instigating that. I think it was David Pastrnak who had just kind of had enough of it. So yeah, I mean it's fun. I think when super skilled non-fighters kind of have that much compete level in the playoffs.
Did you ever get in a fight, Drew, either in pro?
I did, and they did not go very well. But for some reason or another, teams always seem to, especially when guys like your teammates don't care if you win or lose the fight at all, right? It's I think
show up.
Yeah, just got to show up. So I think that's always appreciated.
All right, so it's official. Boston officially gets a first-round pick in that Brad Marchand trade. It was a conditional second-rounder, but because Florida's in the conference final, that now gets bumped up to a first round. So does the deal look a little better? Was it worth it for the Bruins?
No.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, okay. Explain, Ryan.
Okay, here's my explanation. I mean, first rounders are very great. My understanding is that it's either 2027 or 2028. But the damage it did between the Bruins and their fan base, I don't think was worth the pick going from, 58 to 28, because it's going to be a late first rounder. The fact that Marchand wanted to stay initially and things went sideways, and the fact that came out, I feel that deal was not worth it for one selection late in the first round.
What if he comes back?
If he comes back, that's a different story. I will give you that.
Sometimes you got to do right by the player. I always hear that from agents that, that kind of stuff, that stays with agents and players. They're like, hey, you did right by the guy. He wanted to get moved. He only wanted to go to Florida and they made it happen. So maybe it's one of those karma things where the Bruins are either going to get Marchand back or they're going to get someone else going. You know what? I like how you guys run a franchise here.
Yeah, I think it was the right thing to do. I think that I know I was talking to some of his old teammates in Boston. I know that they're all cheering for him really hard to win a cup, and I definitely could see him returning. So if he ends up returning, I think it's going to be kind of a home run deal for them.
All right, we only got time for one more question here, so I'm going to go with Ryan's question here. We got some pretty good cities here for food. All right, we got some barbecue in Dallas and Carolina. Florida, I don't know what Florida's known for. Maybe the Cuban sandwich or Monte Cristo. But best food city left in the playoffs. I'm going to start with Ryan because he's our foodie.
There you go. I'm going to go Dallas because of the high end of their culinary exploits, which would be the brisket barbecue. Carolina obviously has very good barbecue as well, but Pecan Lodge in Dallas, that's one of the best places I've ever been to, so I'm gonna go with Dallas.
Drew,
I'm gonna have to agree. I don't think it's Carolina. Obviously it's not Edmonton. Florida has a ton of options depending on kind of where you are and where you stay, whether you're closer to Miami or not. But I do know everyone in the media after that travel they had to do last year for the Cup final might be on the Dallas bandwagon just because it's a quicker commute for a lot of people in the media.
All right, I'm going to end things by saying Florida all the way. I don't know if you guys have been to Fort Lauderdale's. It's right on the water. It's a place called Coconuts.
Yeah.
Great mac and cheese. You can see the tarpon swimming right beside your seat there. Just a fabulous place.
That's like one of my wife's favorite restaurants. We ate there like once a week when I was playing down there. She loves that place. It's funny. I actually haven't heard or thought about it in a long time. But
There you go. Okay. So ending it on a high note, listen, this is a great episode. Thanks for watching The Big Show. For Drew Shore and Ryan Kennedy, I'm Michael Traikos. Enjoy the hockey tonight, folks. We're back in the conference final. This is great.